This is the Grassy Knoll. It is the 28th of February. That says goodbye to that month. It's 2007. We have with us today Darryl Eberhart. And I'm going to talk to him about this because it's been a real interesting couple of weeks, I think, for Darryl. And first of all, I want to welcome you to the show, Darryl. And do we talk about the website or don't we?
I can give them a website to go up to see my stuff, and it's nice to be on with you, Keith, with anybody, because the alternative media, I think, treats me with a 30,000-foot-long pole, because I guess I'm very politically and religiously incorrect. But you mentioned about talking about the websites. I did have a couple websites that were exclusively devoted to my both my writings and my podcasts. And I'm not going to get too much into it, but they're not there anymore. So they can actually view a lot of my writings. They're almost, the two websites almost mirrored each other. On PastorButch.com, the long title is Call to Decision, like the preposition to, calltodecision.com. But they can get a short title and just type PastorButch.com. It's Pastor Butch Paw down in West Virginia.
Yeah, he's been on the show.
PastorButch.com. And on his homepage, in the left-hand column, and he has a bunch of links and things listed alphabetically, but it's not actually a link. It's just a section of his website. It's called Tackling the Tough Topics, which is the title of one of the newsletters I started writing back in 1998. The other was Examining the Tough Issues. But if they go up to PastorButch.com, on his homepage, look in the left-hand column, run down the alphabetical list, there'll be Tackling the Tough Topics marker. Just click on that marker, and his website master that's up in Canada has posted a whole bunch of my old newsletters, including all the recent ones, too. So that's a place where they can read. And I've written about a lot of different things, Keith. I started off writing about the New World Order in generic terms, and then just the last couple of years, I all of a sudden discovered that there was a real superpower behind the scenes orchestrating things in the religious world and the financial world and the geopolitical world. And, of course, that's what I have recently termed the Vatican, Papacy, Jesuit, Knights of Malta cabal. And I believe they are the real powers behind most of the powerful governments in the world, clearly with the Roman Catholic religion, over 1 billion adherents, and with super financial stock holdings, etc., through their fabulously rich Knights of Malta. So, yeah, by far they're the biggest people out there. But that's I may have a website in the near future that will be exclusively mine, and when I do have that, then I'll get that information out to folks.
A couple of things, if I could. I want to thank Gordon Comstock, by the way, for sending you my way. I had known about you, and sometimes this happens. Like, for instance, we had on Dave McGowan, and people had always said, you really should have Dave on. And I saw his work, and it was good. And I don't know how I don't know why I didn't do it. It just didn't happen. And so finally, I rectified that. And it's the same thing with you, Darryl. I've known you've been out there, and I'm glad Gordon went your way, and said, look, please check what Darryl has to say. And it's not anything new in a sense. You're new, having said what you said about the Vatican, the Jesuits, and the Knights of Malta. And that sounds like too much for people to believe, but we'll talk about that in a second. I mean, that's a hierarchy there. But at any rate, what I find people having a hard time with is the fact that this could be so pervasive, and they still have a hard time believing it because of the PR that comes out of the Vatican, etc. Now, one other thing real quick, I want to tell people there's a new addition, and this is just a little sidebar, to the website on the home page. For some of you who are trying to break it down to people, that things do go bump in the night, that the government, they're not our friends. At the behest of a listener, I put up on my home page links to 3 New York Times stories, okay, that tell you the FBI was involved, you could say, and also pulled off the 93 World Trade Tower bombings. Okay? There's 3 stories up there, straight from the New York Times, and they implicate themselves. They convict themselves. Then you can show that to other people and make them understand this is only the beginning of it. It's not all the FBI's fault. But the fact is, we have a problem. Our government is not our advocate. It's our adversary. And we'll even probably go into this further with Darryl. I've not even brought that up with him, but let me ask you this. Given when I read in Luke about what Satan says he will give Christ if he will subjugate himself, he says the kingdoms of the world. I don't know, sometimes I think, Darryl, that people think that, like, it's kingdoms, so, like, that was then and not now. But kingdoms, governments, all the same thing. What's your take on that?
For sure. The way to control governments is to bribe people, to give them money, to give them power, and sexual favors. And I think a lot of congressmen in the past, and probably to this very day, the new ones that come in, they get them in compromising positions. So if you have basically secret societies operate through intelligence agencies, and I think we get hung up on this idea of, all the CIA couldn't be bad, or all the FBI couldn't be bad, or all the National Security Agency couldn't be bad. No one can pull off a conspiracy without a whole lot of people knowing. Well, can I give them a little bit of my background, and I'll tell them why they can do that?
Absolutely.
And I spent 26 years in the intelligence community. I had a top secret special intelligence clearance that entire time. I was at the top of my profession as a technician. 11 and a half of that was in the old U.S. Air Force Security Service. I learned Russian and Arabic languages. I was a linguist, a traffic analyst, and a reporter in the Air Force. And then I spent 8.5 years in what would be the Army's equivalent to that, the old Army Security Agency, military intelligence. And then I worked 6 years for the National Security Agency after I retired from the military. And the reason that they're able to pull so many things off is that within those intelligence communities where you have people with top secret clearances, everything's on a need-to-know basis. And it's very compartmentalized so that you could be in one room and the room down the hall, you can't get in despite all your top secret special intelligence clearances because it's on a strict need-to-know basis. But the key thing is that most of the people at the CIA, the FBI, the National Security Agency are good, red-blooded, patriotic Americans who are working hard to do their job, especially during the Cold War, that they were fighting against communism and America's enemies. And they're at the bottom. They have no idea, just like a secret society. They're at the bottom. They're pumping information up. And the people at the top feed off that information, collate it, provide it to whom they will, keep what information from whom they don't want it to get to. And that's the way they're able to control things. Just the Kennedy assassination is a beautiful picture of that, because you had Knights of Malta all over the intelligence community. The FBI Assistant Director, Cartho DeLoach, for the FBI, was the liaison to the Warren Commission. Then the CIA liaison to the Warren Commission was another Roman Catholic military order Knight of Malta named James Jesus Angleton. He's the liaison for the CIA. So any information gone back and forth between the Warren Commission, which is an interesting commission, has some of Kennedy's enemies on it, like Alan Dulles, whom he had fired from CIA. Also, a lot of top-level Freemasons are at the heads of these organizations. So again, you don't have to have all of your people in these organizations. All you have to do is have them at key choke points, key leadership positions, like Angleton was the head of the CIA's counterintelligence, probably just about as powerful as the head of the CIA for like decades. He also sat the Vatican desk, he sat the Israel desk, but the key thing was he was the liaison to the Warren Commission, so that any information going back and forth between them were handled by a couple Roman Catholic military order Knights of Malta, and of course you had Roman Catholic Knights of Malta involved in other areas, which I'm sure you've had other people on to talk about during the Kennedy assassination. So they're all over the map in the intelligence community.
Would it be fair to say that when you do have sort of black bag operatives in the intelligence communities, that they are necessarily there because of their membership in a secret society?
I think if they get into any of a top position, they are either in the secret society or they're being, controlled by the secret societies, whether it's through, like I said, whether they give them sexual gifts, whether they give them monetary gifts. It's somebody that's either in with them or totally controlled by them. You're not going to be in a powerful position, I don't think, and last very long. John Kennedy is the perfect example. If you start to buck the system, they're going to either try to buy you off, give you something special or bribe you if they know of sexual indiscretions, etc. And if none of that works, very quickly, if you're very powerful, very high up, that you might reveal secrets or break up, like Kennedy was going to do, break up CIA into 1,000 pieces, especially take the black ops from them and transfer it over to the Pentagon. Then they're going to try to kill you. Most likely they will kill you.
This is not something I want you to dwell on because it'll take us down that road. But because you mentioned this, and because I guess it was Saturday night or something like that, couldn't sleep, watching a documentary on PBS, and it was about Jackie. And so with her in mind, from just seeing this biography of her, would it be fair also to say that to keep the widows quiet, that they are also given cut a deal, shall we say?
I think that happens sometimes. Other times, Jackie's a good example. I don't think she was in the loop. I think John Kennedy and Bobby and a few others were really trying to run stuff out of the White House, and when they started to go against some of their advisors, when he started to print money outside of the Federal Reserve, when he decided to shut down the war in Vietnam, there were just too many powerful interests in the background that decided, hey, he's double-crossed us, he's got to go.
Yeah, and do you wonder if the old man hadn't taken a very debilitating stroke at the end of 61, if he would allow those two to perhaps what I would say go rogue?
If who hadn't had a debilitating stroke?
Joseph Kennedy.
Oh, I had heard from some folks that when they said, your boy's got to go, John, that he just nodded his head. There's been several books written about his ties with, Sam Giancana and others, Joseph Kennedy's.
And of course,
mob.
Of course, the fiction work, which I don't think is fiction, obviously, and the name escapes me. I think it's also the individual who wrote The Manchurian Candidate, had written Winter Kills, which heavily intimates that the father knew it was the price of doing business.
Exactly. Go ahead.
No, finish that thought, because like I said...
another example of good patriotic Americans, you have like Navy SEALs or Special Forces that are sometimes, especially Special Forces, and I don't know if you've ever had Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Marvin on.
No.
He was asked to kill Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, who was tied in with the Kennedy assassination, had the audio-visual section, had the photographs and stuff of the autopsy, and he was trying to get information out. He had a top-secret clearance. His Navy Lieutenant Commander named William Bruce Pitzer, and he was trying to get that information out to the public, and so Marvin, he was then a captain, Special Forces, was asked to take him out at Bethesda Naval Hospital. He refused because he said, Special Forces are only used to assassinate people overseas, and you guys use the CIA here in the U.S., I'm not going to do it. Well, they asked another captain, and they think he might have been the one Special Forces captain that killed him. But the point I'm trying to get here is that they were saying that Pitzer, Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer at Bethesda Naval Hospital, was going to sell secrets to the Soviets. So, you need to kill this guy. And that's how they get good patriotic people, like some Special Forces and that, to assassinate someone who's actually a guy trying to bring, important information to the American people or to reveal evil that's going on within government. And they ask a guy that's been highly trained in assassination techniques or sniper, etc., hey, you need to kill this guy because he's selling secrets. So you can see how it works. They can get a good patriotic American to kill another good patriotic American by lying to him. And that's very sad, but that goes on.
Whenever people talk about, and I'm not saying people, I mean when Wilcox, yourself, Phelps, Tom Richards, when we have discussed, and they have written about the Vatican and the Jesuits, everybody says, oh, well, they can't be into everything, but they certainly are. I mean, the disguises are one, that nobody thinks they're capable of it because they're supposedly ecclesiastical, and two, that they could have such a expansive and efficient organization. But I also want to mention one other thing. And we had a gentleman on yesterday by the name of Greg who has a website that kind of is devoted to occult history, Rochester92.box.com. And Greg, if you're listening, you can be insulted by this as well. I'm going to have a guest on who really is starting to bother me with his tone. and if he's listening today, he probably won't come on because I'm directing it to him. And that is, he writes me an email saying they'll come on the show. He said, but my own views are very different from those who focus on the Illuminati, Freemasons, and such distractions and trivia. Well, I would love to send him back a very measured email, because this is the kind of lunkhead that's out there that makes some of these things happen. This also includes people not believing that the Vatican, the Jesuits, and as you said before, the Knights of Malta can be involved in this stuff. But now, Darryl, having set that all up, there is a hierarchy, and when you mention this along with the temporal coadjutors, you're looking at a framework so that when you mention this, it involves all this, but it makes others think perhaps that we've gone loony. Your take?
Yeah, the reason that is, and it's very sad, and since I'm an American, I can say this, we Americans, for the most part, are extremely history challenged. Not only do we know very little about real church history, not only do we know very little about European history, world history, but we know very little about true American history. I ran into Europeans, Keith, when I was over in Germany and other places that knew far more about American history than a lot of Americans do. And I talked to you earlier about this. We need to be doing more reading. You mentioned about the Jesuits. Most people, they just can't believe that the Jesuits are that powerful. Let me just give you a couple quotes here. You know, a lot of people try to blame it on the Jews or blame it on Freemasons, and it's just like I said, the last couple of years, every stone I started turning over, I started finding Jesuits, Knights of Malta, which is controlled and co-located with the Jesuit order, so involved in almost any key assassination of heads of state, important ones throughout history, involved in fomenting wars like World War I and World War II. So here's a great quote. It's by a Canadian historian, J.E.C. Shepard. And if the Jesuits aren't so powerful and so bad, then why would a quote like this be made? Between 1555 and 1931, the Society of Jesus, that's the Jesuits, were expelled from at least 83 countries, city-states, and cities for engaging in political intrigue and subversive plots against the welfare of the state. According to the records of a Jesuit priest of repute, practically every instance of expulsion was for political intrigue, political infiltration, political subversion, and inciting to political insurrection. So, and most of the people that threw them out, Keith, were Roman Catholic monarchs. They were thrown out of places like Spain and Portugal, like 2 and 3 times each. France, they were thrown out of most of the Central American countries. They were thrown out of Russia several times. And, of course, almost any time that occurred, they came back with a vengeance. They were responsible for assassinating not only President Abraham Lincoln, which is something that's totally disappeared from American history textbooks and from encyclopedias, but they killed Tsar Alexander I and Tsar Alexander II of Russia. They killed King Henry III and King Henry IV of France. That tried to give one of them tried to give religious liberty to all of the French people. So, no, they've got such a track record of murder, not to mention religious genocide like happened in Croatia in the 1940s. There's another great quote, and since people try to, say the Masons are running everything, this is by another historian. It's an American historian named James Parton. Very short quote. He says, "If you trace up Masonry through all its orders till you come to the grand tip-top head Mason of the world, you will discover that the dread individual and the chief of the Society of Jesus, in other words, the head of the Jesuit Superior General, are one and the same person." So clearly, these guys are big power players. If we go back and study European history, we'll find out for centuries, and of course the Jesuits are kind of, as far as the Roman Catholic Church goes, they're a relatively new order. They've only been around 400 plus years, but for those 400 years, almost every single king, queen, the mistresses of the kings, the top generals in those countries all had Jesuits for their father confessors. Their children, were of any royalty or anybody that was important, went to Jesuit colleges and universities. They were at the forefront of setting all those up. So when you become the father confessor to the king or or the Queen or to his mistresses, and all of a sudden you want the king to launch, let's say, a religious genocide against the Waldenses or somebody, you just go in and say, hey, king, we want you to kill all these people, even in your own country, and if he starts to hesitate, well, how about we tell the Queen about your 10 mistresses? That's why I wrote an article about the confessional. It's the greatest intelligence gathering system that the world's ever seen.
Yeah. Also, two things strike me when you were mentioning this. Folks, it's a matter of record. This is a matter of record. I don't even know if it didn't get into some history books. I'm not so sure. But with John Surratt being involved in the plot to kill Lincoln, or perhaps kidnap Lincoln, and where does he wind up going? He goes out through French Catholic Quebec, and he winds up in the Vatican Guard. Now, what's with that? And, of course, the United States threatened to break off diplomatic relations with the nation-state known as the Vatican if he were not returned. And also, he had a confessor up in Baltimore, didn't he, Wiggett?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big, and I think you've had Wilcox on a number of times.
Yes.
And clearly that was, at that time, it was the biggest manhunt ever in U.S. history. But we have exchanges. Fortunately, these have all been recorded. Wilcox put a lot of them in his book, The Transformation of the Republic, which I would urge everybody to get. Do a Google search. I'll probably mention some other books, but Wilcox's book is very thick. He has letters from former Catholic priest Charles Chinnicky, who was a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln, and through these letter exchanges, Brigadier General Thomas M. Harris and others, Edward Sherman, we have lots of documentation about not only the assassination, the trial, but Lincoln himself knowing that the Jesuits were behind fomenting the war, that the Jesuits were out to get him and kill him, and then almost every one of the conspirators was Roman Catholic. The one that they try to blame the most is John Wilkes Booth, as supposedly a Protestant, and he was a nominal Protestant. He was born that, but my goodness, the guy died with some sort of a Catholic, I think it was an Agnus Dei or something, and had been seen going to Mass. I think it was in Baltimore and other places. But the Surratt family, Mary Surratt, the mother, in her house was the den where the whole thing was hatched, and the conspirators, most of the conspirators met, including Booth and John Harrison Surratt, who seemed to be the arch conspirator or the pivotal person, him and his mother, Mary Surratt. But, we have, like I said, where's all this history gone? As growing up, I went to a very good high school. I was in the college prep course. I went to college, and I took history courses, and not once did anyone mention the fact that there were 8 conspirators tried by a military commission, on which Brigadier General Thomas M. Harris wrote a book, Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln, that they hung for the conspirators, including the woman, Mary Surratt. And as you already mentioned, one of the, almost all of them are Catholic, but the one Catholic, John Harrison Surratt, he has his escape route provided. He gets up to Canada. 2 Roman Catholic priests hide this guy out during the greatest manhunt ever in various Catholic places or relatives' places. They not only hide him out, their names, we even have their names. It was Boucher and LaPierre.
Right.
They make sure that he gets on a boat heading for Liverpool. He gets over to England. Catholic Church, again, hides him out at some of their places. He ends up down, like you mentioned, at the Pontifical Zouave unit, a military unit, the Pope's own personal bodyguard military unit, and then he's there under a false name, John Watson. The U.S. is still trying to, they know where he is. They try, because one other guy in the military unit told our guys, and then they sit on it for quite a while because the Vatican drags their feet. They finally agree to turn him over, and he has a miraculous escape away from 6 guys that are guarding him and jumps down a precipice that would have killed anybody. And they finally track him down in Alexandria, Egypt, and arrest him, bring him back to trial, and the Jesuits come up from Georgetown, influence the jury, and the jury gets hung up, basically. And then they tried a second trial, and the guy walked on a technicality. So, the involvement of the Catholic Church was so well known back then. And Lincoln himself said if he kept it from the American people because he was worried that the Civil War would turn into a religious war where the Protestants would turn on the Catholics if they knew the plots that the Jesuits had. I'm sure Wilcox brought this up. The famous inventor of the telegraph, Samuel Morse, traveled through Europe and down to the Vatican, and very famous man, talked to very famous people over there, and he uncovered several plots where they were planning to take the U.S. constitutional republic down. They hated Lincoln. They hated religious liberty. The Pope at that time, I think, what was it? Was it Pius IX? Had come out with a syllabus of errors in 1864 condemning religious liberty and everything, and he had sent nice letters to Jefferson Davis that caused a lot of, by the way, desertions in the Union Army when that came out. They were trying to split the Union, trying to destroy everything that we hold precious, and of course those were all planned at like three major European congresses, the Congress of Vienna, Verona, and then there were later meetings at Sherry that were in, respectively, I believe, 1816, 1822, and 1825, where the first two meetings, Vienna and Verona, you had Catholic monarchs all getting together with a blessing of the papacy, planning the destruction of popular representative government and religious liberty wherever and whenever it would show its face. They especially didn't want it coming to Europe to infect their peoples, but they figured the U.S. was an example, a virus, a cancer that would eventually spread if it wasn't, destroyed or cut out. So where did all this go? Why isn't any of that taught in history? We broke diplomatic relations with the Holy See, I think it was in 1867, because of the overwhelming evidence of Roman Catholic, and particularly the papacy and its Jesuit order, involvement in not only fomenting the Civil War, but assassinating one of America's most beloved presidents, Abraham Lincoln. How could have that all fallen through the cracks if, as a lot of people in the alternative media say, the Jews control all the publication, the Jews control Hollywood? Why wouldn't the Jews, who have been horribly persecuted by the Roman Catholic Church, including during World War II when Jesuits and other Catholic priests put on the black uniforms of the Nazi SS and wiped out a lot of Jews at that time, why wouldn't they be exposing all this? Why wouldn't they expose the Roman Catholic Holocaust that Avro Manhattan wrote about in Croatia in the 1940s, where the Roman Catholic Church, with mainly Franciscan priests, friars, and monks, leading Roman Catholic action, we called the Ustashi military units, in butchering and slaughtering from up to 600,000 to 1 million innocent Serb Orthodox Christian men, women, and children, not just killing them, but brutally torturing them beforehand. Why wouldn't, Hollywood and all of our newspapers be bringing that out? Well, if indeed the Jews control it all.
Well, a couple of things, too. With reference to what you just said in the last couple of minutes, one of the things also is, as we've spoken with other people about, and that is being removed from Europe, where generationally they know the perfidy of the Vatican. And actually, well, let me just stop there for a second, because when I look at the Vatican, I look at it pretty much being, like the office, the paper shufflers in a sense, because the Jesuits actually get it done. I mean, the Pope is just a figurehead.
Right.
That whole bit about Kolbenbach asking to retire is a joke. Do you remember when he went? Who did he approach? Did he approach Ratzinger? Yeah, I think he approached Ratzinger and said, can I, your pontificate retire? And it was actually the other way around. I mean, it just looks good. It's a nice photo op, and it makes it look like the Pope really runs the deal. But in fact, I mean, if you ever saw that photo or remember that news story, I mean, it was kind of comical.
Right, and the Black Pope for many years has totally been the power behind the throne. The Pope, the White Pope, the Pope we see on TV patting little children on the head and smiling, is like you said, he's just a figurehead. He kind of runs the day-to-day affairs at the Vatican as far as photo ops and going to meetings and stuff like that. But the real guys operating behind the scenes are the very powerful Jesuits and the Knights of Malta that they control. And that's why I'd mentioned, like in World War II, it's kind of fascinating. Here we have a major war going on, and who controls the intelligence agencies? Again, remember, secret societies control these intelligence agencies, and by that way you steer countries. In the United States of America during World War II, the Office of Strategic Services, that becomes the CIA. Who's running it? Roman Catholic military order Knight of Malta named William Wild Bill Donovan. Then we jump over into German intelligence, the Nazis on the Eastern Front, and who runs German intelligence? A Roman Catholic military order Knight of Malta named General Reinhard Gehlen, who interestingly at the end of the war comes back and helps William Wild Bill Donovan set up the modern CIA. Then we jump over to the Soviet Union, another major combatant in the war, and who's running their intelligence service? Why, it's a guy who's a Roman Catholic military order, Knight of Malta, Prince Anton Turkel, who uses Jesuits for his couriers. You know, what's going on here? Who's really orchestrating and running things? Hitler himself put into power the Roman Catholic Centrum Party, basically was told to back him. Initially, they weren't too crazy about the Nazis, and a guy named another Roman Catholic military order, Knight of Malta, named Franz von Papen, was the main power, or guy that put Adolf Hitler into power. Almost all the top leaders in, and I don't know if have you had Eric John Phelps on?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, then you know all this. Almost every single regime, from the Nazis to Mussolini's fascist Italy to Slovakia, that actually had a Jesuit Monsignor named Tiso running it. All of these fascist regimes throughout Western Europe, Central Europe, they were all either Roman Catholic prelates or Roman Catholics that were running them, backed by the papacy, the Vatican. The Jesuits actually, people believe that the Nazi SS was really run by Father Himmler, who was the uncle to Heinrich Himmler, who was not, the brightest bulb going. So, the Jesuits were all over running Nazi Germany. Mussolini's top advisor was one of his top advisors was a Jesuit. His father, confessor, a guy named Taci Venturi. They're just all over the map. And when you look at who fomented World War II, who benefited from it, who they killed their favorite targets: Jews, Protestants, Orthodox Christians. And then we started to briefly mention Croatia. It was basically that Holocaust. And that's interesting. We do read some stuff about the Holocaust against the Jews in World War II, and we ought to hear about that. But why does no one mention that kind of forgotten Holocaust where two Jesuit prelates, basically Ivan Saric and Stepinac, these two archbishops, one of Sarajevo, the other of Zagreb, they basically orchestrated one of the most brutal religious genocides in the history of the world, and it didn't happen in the 1200s or the 1400s. It happened in the 1940s, just a few years before you and I were born, Keith.
Well, I don't know.
This is an ancient history. This is, and like I said, they impelled children.
Yeah.
They buried people alive. They burned people alive. They skinned people alive. They crucified Orthodox priests to wooden doors. They had forced conversions where they slit the throats. Of course, the normal mutilating and raping, pillaging, and plundering against the lady folks, from young girls to old women. They killed people with the most crude instruments. They sawed people in half. They crushed their skulls with hammers. Human beings, and again, it was mainly two Jesuits that orchestrated it, and then you had Franciscan friars, monks, and priests that led most of the Ustashi units and encouraged them in the most brutal tortures, and also, by the way, ran some of the worst of the prison camps.
Well,
concentration camps.
You got to admit, they followed the letter of their Jesuit oath when it said the extirpation of heretics, which is, by the way, you and me and others, by any means necessary.
And I want to throw this in here right now, because some people may say, "Oh, he's Catholic bashing," or that I hate Catholics. 90% or better of my relatives are all Roman Catholic. My dad is a Roman Catholic. My best friend that I've ever had in the whole world is a Roman Catholic. Probably 90 to 95% of my friends are Roman Catholics. I live in a sea of Roman Catholicism. I was married to a beautiful Roman Catholic lady. Give me a break, I don't hate individual Catholics. What I hate is a geopolitical, financial, religious organization that basically hides behind the religious organization and has a well-documented history of launching holy wars, holy crusades against, by the way, Christian groups like the Waldenses, the French Huguenots, which were considered Protestants, the Protestant Bohemians. They wiped out the Albigensian Christians in southern France. They almost wiped out the Waldensian Christians. Of course, the Irish Protestants, I think it was around 1641. You mentioned the Huguenots, 1572, the big massacre down there. They just have such a documented history of blood. I think as that famous French statesman Baron d'Aponay, I think it would be the correct, Deponat, said that Roman Catholicism was born in blood, and in its history is written in blood. It's just a fact of history. These guys are a torture-loving, mass-murdering machine. They're a juggernaut that, like a serial killer, that every 50 to 100 years, like in Croatia, where they just go on a rampage. And let's not forget the Office of Holy Inquisition, which still exists. And some of the best scholars and historians that have looked at that figure that maybe from anywhere from 50 to 100 million people were murdered during the years of the Inquisition and that. Well, and of course the wars, like that big religious war, the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, again fomented by the Jesuits.
You know, one of the problems too is, again, in the United States, not being detached somewhat from the European history, and obviously a lot of our relatives, in fact all of us here, probably go back to Europe, but there's another thing that happens too, and that is there's a certain invisibility when you encounter, say, the Jesuits, when you read, say, whether it's fiction or not, books, it's all over the place, but when I saw that, I didn't see it, if you know what I mean. It didn't mean anything to me. I'm like the Jesuits, yeah, they're a bunch of monks, what's the big deal? However, things like, they pop up all the time when I look back at some of the works that I had come across and didn't see it the first time. It gets as strange as this, Darryl. There's a book called The Crazy Makers by Carol Simontachi. It's about nutrition. So what's the Jesuits got to do with it? She cites white sugar as basically a very, processed white sugar is a very unhealthy thing. And a footnote to a quote that she embodies in the book, it states it just like this, that sugar was introduced into the United States by the inscrutable Jesuits. Now, what makes me laugh in a sense is they could have used any kind of adjective they wanted to. They didn't even have to use an adjective. But whoever wrote that work called them inscrutable. What's up with that? But it gets better. You know Burke McCarty's book. She writes it in 29. She says, right now, Jesuits are in Japan instigating anti-American sentiment for a future war. How did she know that in 29? Kevin Annett, who was on the show just the other day, talked about how he's upset with a lot of organized religion and the Vatican for what took place with Aboriginal peoples in Canada. And I said to him, in an email, I said, I'm no fan of the Vatican. He writes back, neither am I, because they wiped out my French ancestors who were Huguenots, all right? And then it goes on, even with, we had a foreign exchange student from Romania. One day she was working in a library, and ironically I worked at a Catholic library, and one early morning I'm like looking, surfing the net, and I read about this story about Romania, about how the Jesuits come in, and the church throws them out, and the Jesuits come back in. So I run this by her, and she's sitting there, she's just book checking, and I say this to her. I said, Tina, is this true? She looks up, she's like, oh yeah. It wasn't even a blinking of an eye. It's like understood. And two more things, too. People should look back at the movie or the book, Shogun and Mission, and see what they were telling you about the Jesuits there. Wouldn't you agree with that, Darryl?
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned Burke McCarty. Interestingly, she wrote a book about Lincoln assassination. Right. I got it right here. It's called The Suppressed Truth about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. But the Jesuits love to remain in the background. They want other people to be blamed for their sins, for their crimes. And that's why, like, you almost always have a Jew at the head of the Federal Reserve. They want to give the New World Order or the conspiracy a Jewish flavor, or they'll point out some big financier that's a Jew, yet they often in the background, especially the Knights of Malta, which let's keep in mind that that's controlled by the Black Pope. It's co-located, the Knights of Malta are co-located in the Vatican with the Jesuit, the Superior General, the Black Pope, that these very powerful Knights of Malta are like like William Randolph Hearst, Henry Robinson Luce. Everyone thinks that the Jews run Hollywood and the publishing. William Randolph Hearst, Knight of Malta, had one of the biggest publishing empires in the world, newspaper empires, and of course people know him through his granddaughter Patty Hearst. And also Henry Robinson Luce had Time magazine. Interesting, all these Roman Catholic Knights of Malta, they fluff and puff some 33-degree Masons like Billy Graham and Pat Robertson. You can find ties when you start looking at any of these, the ecumenical movement, the tele-evangelists and everything. Well, if they're Protestants or evangelicals, why are Roman Catholic Knights of Malta fluffing and puffing them in their newspapers and making them stars like Billy Graham? And I know that some people really love and admire these people, but hey, it's the truth. Dr. Kathy Burns wrote an interesting book about Billy Graham and his friends. What we have to realize is that the ecumenical movement, if you start looking at some like Father Forrest and these other, almost all of the top leaders in the ecumenical movement are Roman Catholics.
But also one other thing, my in-laws, we all revere Billy Graham for the work he did, but there's a real damning piece of film that's incorporated in Chris Pinto's work, Megiddo, The March to Armageddon, and there he's sitting with Schuller, and they're just having a great old time talking about the universal Christ.
Isn't it something? All of these guys like Robert Schuller, he was a nobody. He's a 33-degree Mason. Of course, he was a disciple of Norman Vincent Peale, another 33-degree Mason. That's why I said secret societies really run everything. And for people who think, well, it's only the Freemasons, I mentioned that quote by Parton where you trace up the head to the top Mason. And there's a great book. It was written by John Daniel, and it's called The Grand Design Exposed. I think it's about a 411-page book. And if anyone wants to see how the Jesuits took over British Freemasonry and French Freemasonry, which were the two biggest ones on the European continent, that book, I think, makes pretty much an ironclad case that the Jesuits indeed did take over Freemasonry. So when you think of the Jesuits having not only their own very powerful order, controlling the very powerful Knights of Malta, and then controlling the top levels of Freemasonry, and then controlling the entire mechanism of the Roman Catholic Church with all of its wealth, its gold, its stock holdings, etc., then I have to ask people out there who want to blame everything on the Jews as running the New World Order, point me out anybody else on the geopolitical, financial, religious chessboard that's more powerful than the Jesuit order.
Well, I'm going to read you something now. We spent about 30 to 35 minutes talking about the history that's behind the Vatican and the Jesuits, and it's documentable. It's all there. But here we go. This is my favorite. This is on Eric Hufschmidt's site. Considering all that we've said now, and here's what his take. Why would Zemansky, Phelps, Vyzygoth, and other truth seekers promote such obviously stupid theories? Why are they willing to spend so much of their lives and money to deceive us? Why are they willing to make fools of themselves? Why are they willing to expose themselves as criminals? But it gets better. Let's see. These liars, we'll meet one day, Eric, are spending a lot of their time and money on this Vatican deception. They certainly are not doing this for recreation. They certainly have a very important reason for promoting this deception. And what's the real deal? Down below, he says, in such a case, the job of people such as Phelps and Zemansky, I guess that doesn't mean me, is to divert Catholics away from the evidence of the Jewish infiltration. I wrote to Hufschmidt, and it broke down what he wrote about me, and I said, did you check this? Did you check this? Where is this? Where are we lying? Where is this criminal behavior? Et cetera, et cetera. He's a blithering idiot. He had nothing to say. He just started prattling on about how all the popes are Jewish and everybody in the Vatican is crypto-Jewish. Nothing to back it up. Now, I'm wondering, honestly, Darryl, if I get a chance to ask one question after I shirk this mortal coil, about the secrets of life, one of the things I'd ask about is what did the Pope say to, Genghis or Attila that turned them away from the attack? There's another interesting situation. Or in the case of these characters, we play a game called Stupid or Liars. Are they lying? Are they being paid to do this, or are they just stupid? I can't understand where Hufschmidt's coming from, and I'm not asking you to drop names. I'm doing it. I have no idea where his head is at. I really probably would be frightened if I did. But they've got nothing to back it up except nothing but hate. And there's one other...
usually it's just an emotional knee-jerk response, and that's why I know, and again, I'm not picking on Roman Catholics because most of the people I love that are close to me are Roman Catholic. I just have to say that is a knee-jerk response from most Roman Catholics. If you mention the power of the Vatican or the Jesuit, they immediately tag you with your Catholic bashing, your anti-Catholic, and by throwing that died in the good graces of the church. And again, it's the classic example of setting up a front group to take the blame or the heat off the Jesuits for the French Revolution, which they were all over, and blaming it on like this front group called the Illuminati. Well, the same things happen with the Jews. They'll find a Jew to put as the head of the Federal Reserve, or they'll find a Jew as a banker in another place, and they'll point to him and say, look, the conspiracy's Jewish. But if you look a little bit further behind the scenes, you'll find out that the Jesuits and their Knights of Malta are the real power brokers that are running things. And I like to tell some other people that is the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Baptists, while they may be weak in fighting evil these days, they may have some doctrinal error, but there's only one mega church in the entire history of so-called Christianity that has had an office of Holy Inquisition and that has launched wars against other Christians, and that is the Roman Catholic Church. And it's not just a church, and that's what we've got to get people away from. It is a geopolitical financial juggernaut that uses religion as a cloak to hide behind, and also to milk a lot of money from people to pay, try to pay and pray people out of purgatory masses for the dead, etc. I won't even get into the doctrinal errors of the Roman Catholic Church. They're legion, to say the less. But the fact of the matter is that my main concern, and it ought to be the concern of everyone, is a church with a history of assassinating heads of state, of fomenting wars and revolutions, of launching, as I said, religious genocide, holy crusades against not only Muslims, against not only Jews, but also against Bible-believing Christians, other Protestant groups, and Orthodox Christians. For a lack of better words, it's a torture-loving, mass-murdering machine that ought not to be allowed to exist in any free country. And, people can take what they want from that. I'm not a hater of individual Roman Catholics, but they hate religious liberty, the Roman Catholic Church hierarchy. They've written that. We've got, I think it was the bishop out of St. Louis. We've got quotes from popes like Pope Pius, I think it was 9, with the Syllabus of Errors, where they came right out and said they hate popular representative government, they hate religious liberty, and if they ever get power in any country, then those items will disappear. And throughout history, modern history, the Roman Catholic Church has always been lockstep with not just the Nazis, but any fascist-type regime. As a matter of fact, the Jesuit order, Catholic? Catholic?
Yes.
Came out with that quote that the fascist regime...
Civilta
Catholic.
There you go.
Yeah, they came out with that quote that the regime most closely loved, by the Roman Catholic Church, is a fascist regime. My goodness, their own statements, condemn them for their hatred of religious liberty and popular representative government. And we're just stupid if we allow our nation to commit national suicide because we're not going to talk about the most powerful, as I said, geopolitical, financial, and religious player on the chessboard. And to exclude the Vatican, Jesuits, as I said, the Vatican, papacy, Jesuit, Knights of Malta cabal from talk about the New World Order it's just borders on ridiculous. We all need to read more. Can I just tell them some books? People can go up and do Google searches, but one of the best books to read is A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt. It not only gets into Catholic doctrine, it gets into a lot like papal infallibility, it gets into the Croatian Holocaust. It just ties in a lot about the Holy Office of Inquisition. It's one of the best books out there. It's A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt. There's a tremendous book by Edmund Paris. He's a Frenchman. He wrote The Secret History of the Jesuits. The Secret History of the Jesuits. If you can get a hold of one book about the Jesuits, read that and see how they fomented both World War I and World War II. Fortunately for us, a lot of Frenchmen have done a lot of writing about the Jesuits. Book I already mentioned, The Grand Design Exposed by John Daniel. That's a great book, shows you how the Jesuits were heavily involved in the French Revolution and also how they took over both the British and French branches of Freemasonry. C.T. Wilcox's book, The Transformation of the Republic, tremendous book. Avro Manhattan wrote a book specifically about that horrible Holocaust in Croatia that the Roman Catholic Church visited upon the poor Orthodox Christians there. It's called The Vatican's Holocaust. The Vatican Holocaust by Avro Manhattan. I'm sorry, The Vatican's Holocaust, apostrophe S there, by Avro Manhattan. Actually has pictures. Jack Chick wrote a book called Smokescreens, where he gets into at least 3 of the massacres. He gets into the one in Croatia, again showing pictures of both the victims and the perpetrators of that horrible Holocaust in Croatia in the 1940s. But he also gets into the one you mentioned, the French Huguenots. I think that was 1572 and 1641, I believe, with the slaughter of Irish Protestants. Here's a great book. It's out of print, but people may be able to find. It's written by a Roman Catholic. It is interesting. Some of these books are written by Roman Catholics. It's called Hitler's Pope, The Secret History of Pius XII. It was written by John Cornwell, Catholic historian, wrote a very good book. If you can get a used copy of that, that'll show you that Pope Pius XII was not the saint that they tried to make him out to be. There's a great book by a former Catholic priest named Charles Chinnicky. It's called 50 Years in the Church of Rome. If you want to read a lot about the time of the assassination of Lincoln, that period, again, Charles Chinnicky, very, very close friend with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln defended Chinnicky when, as a priest, he was accused by another Catholic prelate who put his sister up to accusing Chinnicky of raping her. And Lincoln got this guy off, and the Jesuits started hating Lincoln then. So that's called 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chinnicky. There was a brigadier general named Thomas M. Harris wrote a book, Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He sat in on that 12-man military commission that tried 8 of the conspirators and hung 4 of them. And then you mentioned Burke McCarty. She wrote The Suppressed Truth about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. They can get both of those books in one volume from Ozark Book Publishers. Again, just go up and do some searches. There was another guy named Hector McPherson wrote The Jesuits in History. So the information's out there, Keith, if people want to avail themselves of it. And we all need to do more reading, more investigating. Don't take Keith's word for anything. Don't take my word for anything. Just read the overwhelming history. And I think that people that make an honest effort to do that, whether they're Roman Catholic or not, are going to come to the conclusion we've got a very big problem in the world and in the United States of America because we have an institution, and that's the Vatican Vatican Papacy Jesuit Knights of Malta Cabal that just is pushing for a one-world government, pushing for a one-world religion, and that made plans to do away with our constitutional republic back in the 19th century. And if we don't face that, then there's no way that we're going to ever beat the enemy in this or win if we won't even recognize who the main enemy is. That's where I get a big problem with a lot of the alternative media, because they are trying to blame everything on the Jews. I think some do it out of ignorance, but I'm not going to name any names, I think, but some of them are, as Eric John Phelps would say, they are probably, it's not on the Jesuit payroll. They have wealthy Roman Catholics that are supporting their broadcasts or their ministries, and they're not going to do anything to offend their Roman Catholic audience, but some of them may actually be, as Eric John Phelps says, Jesuit temporal coadjutors. They are out there deliberately throwing out a red herring in this idea that the Jews are running the conspiracy to take the heat and the spotlight, if I may use that term, the spotlight, off of the real power brokers behind the scenes.
Well, look, I think I'm having a little bit of an epiphany about the two alternative or patriot, whatever you want to call them, because they're not completely patriot, and they were never meant to be, in fairness to them. But I'm thinking about the really bad network and the garbage can network, RBN and GCN, and the only person that will touch the Jesuits, and I believe it's not sincere, is Szymanski, because he knows nobody else is doing it, and that's become his bailiwick, but he also has a leg in both worlds, as he promoted just the other day. Now, I have people on who deal with occult history, all right, but I mean, I don't promote what they do. I think it's important to hear that, what they have to say. But when it comes to this one world stuff especially, I won't have anybody with that. And he's got somebody on O'Connell's, I think he did an interview with, who's got a website, and it's nothing but one world this and one world that. And if you don't understand that as the satanic takeover to those of you who are spiritual, and the NWO for those of you who are not, then you got to have your head examined. Now, having said that, though, The Powerless Hour with Joyce and Dave, they won't touch it. Monteith won't touch it, and Jones won't touch it. And I find that's very interesting because as far as I know, and you can bear this out if you want to, Darryl, we only got about 3 minutes left, but that they would rather not lose the affiliates and the money than to share the truth.
I think a lot of it is that, and like I said, there may be some cases where some of these people are actually working for them. I'm not going to, because I can't read motives and intentions of anybody's heart. What really bothers me is, and I quit listening to the shortwave basically because of that, is that, you mentioned Alex Jones, anyone that called in about the Vatican, I called in a couple times, my friend Walt Williams up in Michigan called in, Alex always tried to poo-poo it off. At least Alex also poo-pooed off the idea that the Jews were running everything. He just blames it all on a few rich European families. But most of the others, from what I understand on the shortwave, there's a lot of the new ones that have come on that everything is the Jews running everything, and I think that's a deliberate red herring, like I said, that's being thrown out. There are several, the two networks that you mentioned, interestingly, the old Spotlight, which is now the American Free Press, advertises heavily on that. And I will say this about the American Free Press. And by the way, I used to buy that. I used to subscribe to it for a number of years. I used to buy extra copies to hand out to people. They had good things. But they concentrate totally on Jewish neocons. And there's some other people in the alternative media do the same thing. But as far as a written version, and they have a lot of support that they throw to Michael Collins Piper, who puts out a lot of books. And again, they're blaming everything on the Jewish neocons, the Zionists, maybe some of the Masons and stuff like that. But they absolutely won't touch anything about the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, no doubt. We're running out of time. So, Darryl Eberhart, thanks again for coming on. And before you go, just tell people where they might be able to check out your work as it is on the internet. Right
now, there's a lot of my writings are up on Pastor Butch Pau's website, and just type in Pastor Butch, B-U-T-C-H, PastorButch.com. And again, on his homepage, in the left-hand column, just run down on the left-hand column until you come to Tackling the Tough Topics. Click on that little box or marker, and that'll give you a whole bunch of articles I've written. I've written a lot about wars also, Vietnam War, Korean War, World War I, World War II, Civil War, and I think I put a lot of information in there, Keith, that they're not going to find in most American history textbooks.
All right, listen, Darryl, thank you again for coming on. You can also check out his audio at GordonConst.com.